Welcome. This is the final installment of our Bible study on the 15th chapter of Luke's Gospel. There are three parables, and we're focusing on the last parable. Sometimes it's called the parable of the Prodigal Son, but it's a little misnamed. As a matter of fact, the word prodigal has been associated with that parable for so long that we mean the wayward son, and the word prodigal really means extravagant, wild living, the wild living of the younger son in the story. Just to remind you that these three stories are told: the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost sons. Sometimes the parable is called the parable of the two lost sons, the parable of the waiting father. In this case, Timothy Keller calls it the parable of the prodigal God. And so I'm going to start out this morning with a retelling of that from, it's called The Word on the Street by Rob Lacey. It's a paraphrase from the 1990s designed to be hip, but I'm going to actually show you pictures from a children's book because I love the illustrations, and it'll be something different and fun. So I'll try to put those two together, even though they come from a slightly different place, and then we'll talk about it because the pictures will stop before the parable does. Remember, this is written for children. Let me share screen here, and I'm going to go here. And this is what we've got. Yeah. Okay. So here you have Jesus, and he is starting to tell this story. Now, if you'll notice, he's telling this story. The people behind him are actually Pharisees. And that's because the chapter begins. Jesus is surrounded by a whole range of undesirables. Of course, the religious leaders and law enforcers spot this and start their tutting and frowning routine again. This chap doesn't only talk to these lowlives, he actually shares his lunch with them. They whine. So Jesus says, loud enough for the tutting club to hear, ... This factory owner guy has two sons. The kid brother gets it into his skull that he's had enough. He goes to his, here's the kid, here's the dad. In this case, they're not factory owners, right? They're going with the agricultural image. He goes to his dad, and as much as wishes the old man dead, he asks for his half of the inheritance, sharpish. The dad almost has a heart attack from the shock, but he sits down, does the sums, sells some shares, and hands over half the family assets. The son doesn't even hang around to hear his dad's top 10 tips for survival. He legs it. Within weeks, he's off to foreign climes, spending the nights filling the glasses of the designer set with his liquid assets. Here he is coming to that far country. He comes in, he expects everybody to be excited. No one knows who he is, and yet his money seems to attract a group of very enthusiastic friends, especially when he starts spending money. They go to the hat man and evidently buy each an expensive hat. He's got a bunch of rings on baubles on his fingers, and then everybody gets a wooden bird thing. Remember, this is for kids, right? They have that feast that he talks about. He has such a great time, he can't remember any of it the next day. Of course, the money goes down the toilet. So do the friends when they realize he's broke. You can see here, oops, no money, oops, no friends. And so he surfs around and finds a site called www.worstjobspossible.com. He scrolls through the search results, ends up cleaning out the pigsties, Not such a great career move since he still counts himself Jewish. He's there with his shovel, scratching away, and suddenly a light bulb goes on just above his head. What am I doing? The worst job in the old man's empire is like jet setter status compared to this. If I had any food in my stomach, I'd be throwing up. I'll hitchhike home. I'll work on a speech, something like, "You don't have to think of me as family, but please, Father, give me a job." After a long, hot trip, he turns the corner into his old street. His dad sees him and runs out into the street in his slippers, throws his arms around him and lifts him up, spins him around, and the noise. The whole street hears it. It is so embarrassing. Now, that is when the pictures are over. But of course, the story continues. The son starts his speech, but the dad cuts in, telling his personal assistant to arrange the biggest street party ever. "My son was virtually dead and he's come back. He was lost, now he's turned up, so they party." Don't you just love a happy ending? Me too. Sorry, not this time. See, there's still the big brother issue. He's coming home from work. He turns the same corner and thinks he's in a scene from an old musical, right? Dancing, music, tables right up the middle of the street, everyone having a fantastic time. He calls over to one of the waiters and asks, "What, did we just win the lottery or what?" The employee answers, "Better than that, sir. Your brother's back. Your dad's blown the whole entertainment budget on one party." And that's the trigger. The older brother loses it. Furious, he walks off, kicking lampposts, ranting and swearing. His dad catches up with him, but he has to fend off words he's never heard from his eldest. "I've slogged my guts out, slaving over your accounts, doing exactly what you told me to do. I never even taken sick time when I fancied a day down at the beach. And did you ever throw a party for me and my mates? No. But when this waster comes crawling back, oh yes, he gets the full treatment. Well, thanks, Dad, for absolutely nothing." "Son," his dad says, grabbing him by his shoulders and eyeballing him, "you're around all the time, and I love it. What's mine is yours. But how could I not throw a party? As far as I knew, your brother was dead. Now he's alive. He could have been anywhere. Now he's here with us. Come on in and join the party." Again, a different version, paraphrase of a story and some pictures that add a little bit of life maybe to something we've heard over these last several weeks multiple times. But you get the idea. You get the idea of the story. It's a classic story. It's a deep story. And now we've had a chance to hear it one more time in a new way. And of course, we know that the story ends there, and we don't know what the older brother decides to do. You know, I was thinking about this earlier today. And Keller makes a lot out of the fact that in the first story, a sheep is lost, shepherd goes to find it. Second story, a coin is lost, woman takes her house apart to find it. Third story, a son is lost, nobody goes to find it. That it would have been the elder brother's job, the true elder brother who represented the heart of the father, to go and bring the son back and pay whatever it cost out of his own inheritance to restore his brother back home, because that's what the father really would have wanted. But this older brother doesn't do that. But I wondered, the father does come out looking for the older brother, doesn't he? The only person in all the stories who isn't searched for is the younger brother, but the father actually comes out looking for the elder brother to bring him back into the party. The elder brother is as lost as that lamb, as gone as that coin, and we might argue as dead as to the father as the younger son. But the father is waiting for his other son to go find him, and he won't, or he doesn't. But he certainly doesn't expect the younger son to go find his older brother. That would have been a mix-up of categories. It wouldn't have made any difference. It would have just ended up in a fight, maybe even Cain and Abel style murder, right? But the father does come out to seek and to bring home the older brother. And Jesus stops the story. I think one of the interesting questions for us as we read about and we think about this story as followers of Jesus who live in community with each other. Of course, it's very difficult to do that during this coronavirus. Let's think about the younger. I'm going to call them younger siblings, because obviously we're not just talking about sons here. The way of self-discovery, where the individual is free to pursue their own goals and dreams, regardless of what's expected of them, the traditions, or the impact on the community. Right? That's the younger brother in this story. They react negatively to the inflexible conventions, the prejudice, the predetermination of the hierarchical authority, the expectation of conformity, right? I'm the only one who can decide what is right or wrong for me. And I'm going to live as I want to live, and I'm going to find my own true self and happiness on my own, thank you. And they're open to experiment with any option that's out there. And then as we know, there are good options and there are bad options. There are easy ways and there are hard ways. And there are deceptive ways. What would a church look like that was laser focused on trying to reach the younger siblings that are out there in our community? In other words, people like the younger brother in the parable. What would it be like if all we tried to do was reach those people? That was our goal. Is there a way that we could communicate the good news of Jesus, the depth and breadth of his love, the commitment behind his sacrifice on the cross to make us one with God, to take upon himself what is not just me finding my own way, but a rebellion against God, our lostness? Is there a way to do that that doesn't just feel like one more set of rules, one more set of guidelines and commandments that these folks are going to have to conform to? Can we offer the pathway, a kind of Christianity originally was called the way. Interesting. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Before we were named after Jesus, Christos, Christians, we were called people of the way. Look it up in Acts. How would we go about trying to reach the younger brothers and sisters, the people of self-discovery in our community? That's a question I really think that we ought to wrestle with. And I think saying, well, help them realize how bad that path is and have them jump over to become like the elder brother. I just don't think that's likely. I did this Bible study with a group at church, and one of the members of the church said something just so profound, it's just stuck with me, and I can't shake it off. They said, if you were going to look for them, we were saying, well, go to the bars, go to the place where people like to party and spend their money in extravagant living. Like that's where the younger brother would have been. Except when the younger brother was spending all his money and he had lots of friends and things were going great, he didn't feel any need to go back to the Father. He was having a blast. And this person in the Bible study said, yeah, what really need to do is you need to spend some time at the pigsties. And I thought, that is absolutely right. What are the pigsties? Where are the places where people, quote, come to their senses and understand how far away they are? Is that in recovery groups? Is that in people trying to work out of indebtedness, like financial peace or consumer debt? Is that in jails? Is that in unemployment lines or soup kitchens? Those again are obvious places. It's not a socioeconomic thing. Again, somebody on staff pointed this out to me. It's not people who don't have money. There is all different kinds of pigsties, right? Your spouse comes home and says, the party's over. You're not any fun anymore. Well, no kidding. We've got 3 kids and we both work. Where's the time for fun? Something to think about. How about elder siblings, right? The way of moral conformity, right? You fulfill your calling, you verify your chosen status in the eyes of God by adhering to the commandments and practices of the faith, which all seems pretty much like being a Christian. The standards of the community and the family are put before the fulfillment of you as an individual. I'm not going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what the tradition and the community want me to do. And I'm going to do my duty. I'm going to honor the faith of my parents, the patriotism of my country, and so on and so on and so on. Whether they want to or not, whether their heart is in it or not, whether it brings them joy or whether it just alleviates their guilt and staves off their fear, that's what they're going to do. So what would a church look like that was trying to retain or reach just the elder brothers and elder sisters from the parable? What would that look like? Maybe not radically different than what church looks like now. Although maybe when we look at Trinity and the way mainline churches are structured, we're very grace forward. We focus on the power of forgiveness and reconciliation, and we emphasize that. And then we talk about, out of that, the fact that God first loved me, then I love God, and in return, I want to please God and do the things God wants to do. More sometimes theologically conservative churches, even before you get started, here's what you need to do. You need to pray this prayer. You need to read these passages. You need to make, this kind of lifestyle choices. Boom, 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 boom. And when you do all those things, then you're qualified to call yourself a Christian. That's a different approach. One tends to focus a little on the behavior and externals. One tends to focus a little bit more on the heart and the internals. And obviously a balance between the two is important. But remember, as far as Jesus is concerned, the Father still has to come out of the party in order, he has to leave to come out and try to find the lost elder brother in the parable. The elder brother is still lost. And, there are people who would like to say, well, there are a lot of those Christians who are, every Sunday kind of Christians, and they're no closer to God than people outside the church. And I would say, says who? How would you know that? What is that based on? Because that's a very Pharisaical assumption to make in itself, is it not? Isn't that what an elder brother would say about anybody else? I mean, that's the beauty of. There's a passage in Keller's book where he says the beauty is Jesus never stoops to being an elder brother about elder brothers. Jesus never is a Pharisee to the Pharisees. He loves them. It's clear that the Father loves his oldest son every bit as much as he does his youngest son. The tragedy is they're both lost. But I do think Jesus seems to suggest that the struggle is a little bit greater with someone who thinks they are already in or deserve to be in with God when their hearts are not. It's harder to reach those folks than it is to folks who are obviously not on board. The folks who are obviously failed are easier to reach than those who are upright and have, as we talked about last week, their list, a big list of reasons why God should love them and accept them and retain them. And the third category that Keller talks about is the true elder sibling. And that's the way of relationship. Conformity in order to please and enjoy the Father. Compassion and mercy for the rebel and the Pharisee. The one who goes out to find the lost sibling for the sake of the Father. Father, my younger brother has been a fool and now his life is in ruins, but I will go look for him and bring him home. And if the inheritance is gone as I expect, I will bring him back into the family at my expense. What would a church look like? Whose sole goal was to try to develop and nurture the attitude of being a true elder sister or brother for all. Certainly you would emphasize hospitality, acceptance of everybody and welcome. You'd have to have some clear path that you would expect people to kind of develop certain characteristics, right? The desire to enjoy and please God, an emphasis on what healthy relationships look like, where God is at the center, an urgency of going out and looking for those who are lost, being sensitive to even those who may be lost close at hand. You'd have to develop those skills and practices. You'd have to develop the kind of leaders that a leader would be, a true elder sibling. And you'd have to develop a method for reaching the next generation. Ironically, I think those are the four areas that we are emphasizing as a church at Trinity on Jackson right now through a program we call ADAPT, We've identified a need to rethink and beef up our hospitality, developing a clear, intentional path of discipleship, bringing leaders in line with our mission and purpose, both professional leaders and lay leaders, and reaching the next generation is part of all three of those things. And I think to some extent, the split that is seeming to be going on in the United Methodist Church right now over whether or not to include LGBTQ sisters and brothers fully in the life of the church or not, could almost be seen, or some people like us to see it as a difference between people who love God, who are more along the lines of self-discovery, and those who are along the lines of moral conformity, butting heads together. And I would love to enter that third option. What does a true elder sibling think about the gay and lesbian brothers and sisters in faith? I think that would be it'd be a whole nother study into itself, but it would be a worthwhile one, I think, to do if we could do it without being angry and frustrated with one another. I think you could have a lot of power. One of the things, and we don't have time for it today, but one of the things that struck me is that if you read Luke 15, you could see, or you could almost intimate that there are stages of maturity, Christian maturity. For instance, the younger brother is a little bit at the lowest stage of Christian maturity. He's almost, I love me because I am the one who matters most. He doesn't care about his father, but we don't know whether he cares about his father or not. He doesn't hesitate to throw his father over when he gets in his way on that his desire to find himself. So if he had a prayer, it'd be a very childlike prayer. Gimme, 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 right? Chronologically, theologically, we all start out that. Lord, give me what is mine so I can do my own thing. Lord, a baby cries because it's hungry, because it's wet, because it's dirty, because it needs something. That is a very basic level who we all are. So there, we can look down our noses on that, but that's where we all are. The second stage is I love God because I'm afraid not to. I want to go to heaven, but more importantly, I want to avoid hell. There is in that a seed of the elder brother or the elder sibling syndrome, right? The older brother keeps his nose clean and does whatever his father asks him to do, in part because he's afraid that if he doesn't, his father's going to punish him or dad will not give him his future inheritance. There is a little bit of that. If you're not completely sure that you're forgiven and loved, then you are always second guessing, right? Yourself, always trying a little, maybe too hard to win God. He says, I'm here, I'm acting like a slave, and what have I gotten for it? That's hardly a wonderful relationship. Maybe the third stage is the full-blown elder sibling syndrome, right? I love God because he's promised to bless and help me. And who doesn't love the promises of God? I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope in a future. Who doesn't want to cling to that? We are creatures that are dependent upon our Creator. That's how it is. But you got to be careful that you don't begin to think that you're entitled to blessings because of your list. I've chosen good over bad. I've given to the poor. I've avoided temptation. I've taught junior high Sunday school for 20 years without a Sunday off, and now God Don't you think you owe me something for that? Right? The elder brother, how do you know when you're giving to God or living right because you want to please God rather than you want to extort some kind of blessing from him? It's the orientation of your heart as much as your actions that determine whether or not you are lost or whether you are found. There are two aspects of Christian maturity that are implied in the parable but not stated expressly, and those two are found in the true elder brother, which is pointed toward by Jesus himself. I love God because God first loved me. That's the nature of the gospel. We don't love God because God will do something for us to keep us from harm. We love God because he has already kept us from so much harm. He has already blessed us. We come to believe that God is faithful. There's a communion prayer that says, we come, each of us, a living sacrifice, not offered to appease you, not offered to persuade you, but offered in gratitude for the sacrifices you have already made on our behalf. And the fifth and final stage of Christian maturity is I love God for who God is. Learning to love God for God's sake. And see, I think this is what the Father really wants from all his children, from both his sons. Perfect love is not contingent on what someone does or says. It's based on who someone is. A mother loves her son because he is her son, and there need not be any more reason than that. A father loves his daughter because she is his daughter. Always was, always will be. She is his and he is hers, period. It is to understand that you are a child of God, fearfully and wonderfully made, and you may be formed out of the dust, but he never wants us to forget that we are also made in his own image. He is our creator. We are his creature. We are his. He is ours, period. Jesus is the heart of our recklessly extravagant Father. He is the Father's true eldest son, come to bring back the lost, to bring us home to the loving embrace of the Father. Because Jesus, and because of what he has done, the lost have been found. Because of Jesus, we no longer have to try to earn or make ourselves worthy of God's blessing or his help or his favor. On account of Jesus, we are no longer afraid that God will smite us if we drift out of line. He is the one who has freed us from the prison of self-centeredness and self-righteousness and anger. And all that God wants is that we would delight in his presence, that we would feast in his grace, now and always. See, I think that is the point of the parable. And I hope this time together in this Bible study has been productive for you. I hope that it has allowed you to do some reflection and thinking about probably one of the most profound set of passages in the entire Bible. One that we could study and will probably study as long as we live and continue to find new insights about who we are, about whose we are, about the kind of relationship God desires to have with us, and about the opportunity to be his people in exciting new ways, to imitate what we see in his true Son, the true elder brother, Jesus the Christ. God's blessings be with you, now and always. Amen.